And so, here we are at the very end of Arcane. Sorry it took this long to cover Act 3, but if you look at the length of this video, that should explain a lot. At this point, you know the drill, we're gonna go through Act 3, we are gonna put everything into context, and we are gonna dig out all the possible details we can find. Now, while this is an end of an era, don't worry, there are still more Arcane videos I can make. We can still do a deep dive into the ending, we can also just explore the world to the fans of Arcane, we can also explain who the heck are the Black Rose, and also where the heck is Riot going next. So in short, there is still more to come. But for now, enjoy this movie that I made, I guess. Also, should be obvious, there are gonna be spoilers. Maybe you shouldn't be watching this video before watching the series. But off we go! Episode 7 starts with the intro, where we are already getting an alternative version of Ekko and Jinx. And that's because, of course, this entire episode happens in an alternative universe where a Hextech was never invented. In fact, right at the beginning, we can see Ekko from this universe. That's why he is so calm and he's writing down his notes. You can see he's working on their little school project, which is this invention on the table. It kinda later gets turned into the Z drive. And among his scribbles, you can already see the powder of this universe. Then we get a quick wide shot of the journal. Unfortunately, I don't think we can read any of this, but it confirms that he is working on the casing that gets turned into the Z drive, after which Ekko gets jumped by all the time anomalies, which shows us the moment the Ekko from our universe overtakes the body of the one in this universe. This is an important thing to mention, because it confirms, even though this is technically a setup for a multiverse, you can't have multiple copies of the same person in the same universe. This gets referenced later too. So from this point on, our Ekko is now standing in Benzo's shop in another universe. Which means all the previous Easter eggs from Benzo's shop are still here, such as the Liandry's Torment or the Eye of the Oasis. Here, as Ekko starts to panic, he approaches a pendulum clock. Not only is this referencing the different timeline, but also time was always Ekko's theme. Also, this pendulum clock in our universe is what was used to introduce Ekko in Season 1. Now it's happening again in the alternative universe. But that is when Powder appears on screen. And immediately we can point out some details on her. First of all, her hairstyle is different because Silco is not the one styling it in this universe. But also, notice the pendant on her neck. This is the same one that Vi had when they were kids. And of course, she is wearing it in this universe because Vi is dead. Here, Ekko hasn't figured out what happened yet, and so his first reaction is to attack her. But then Benzo comes in, and we get another wide shot of this room. And yep, the earlier Easter eggs are still here, including the Rabadon's death cap, which was here in Season 1. Then we get the quick genius and madness quote that circled the internet. And yes, there is a dead puppy behind them. But Ekko can't help himself, and so he hugs Benzo. As he does that, the Arcane spazzes out and we go through the intro. After this, we get a quick compilation that catches Ekko up with this universe. He arrives at the last drop where we can see Vander alive. He still has the wrap around his hand, which means that even in this alternative universe, him and Silco still fought. But they ended up on good terms anyway. In fact, this was teased in Act 2. There, Jinx mentioned that if Silco found Vander's letter in the mines, things could have been different. And here we can see how their lives would have been affected. Then we get a quick shot of the jukebox, which is decorated with memes and pretty pictures, including a not crazy monkey, quite a difference from Jinx's original tags. And yes, all the background characters here could be previously found at the last drop too. We can then see Vander and Benzo at the bar. And you can see Vander doesn't have his iron gloves hanging above it. Then Powder snaps Ekko out of it. And in the back we can see that the locals are playing games. Specifically, this is the score for the dart games. Here we can see Benzo against two other characters. It kinda looks like Vander and Silco, and based on the crown, we can see that he won. But also there is a game between Milo, Powder, Ekko and Clagger. Next, as Ekko mentions he feels like he woke up in the wrong universe, we can see him subconsciously drawing the anomaly. He then stands up after getting another headache, and we can see what likely is whiskers. The original invention Powder made with just puffed smoke. After which, Milo and Clagger appear, with Clagger holding his own invention for their upcoming competition. In this case, it is one of the plants that are producing clean air, which was sometimes utilized by the rich in the other universe where Zaun was heavily polluted. In fact, in this conversation, as Ekko is shocked, Clagger explained they finally got their hybrids to feed off of the Fisher gases, although they don't grow. So right now, his plant is still not as effective as it could be. Next, we can see the waitress is one of the girls that followed Jinx. It's the same one we could see in the prison during the riots. Of course, Milo is into her and so he follows her. Jinx then joins in and saves Milo from himself, as Clagger and Ekko stay here alone. Clagger mentions to him where would he be without her. This is where Ekko gets another anomaly glitch, because realistically, without her, he would be in his own universe. And every time one of these anomalies strikes, he subconsciously keeps drawing it. After which, for the first time, we learn that the girl is called Gert. Here, as Powder joins in, she mentions the Cam Sisters, a local band that has their own shows, whom Gert is teased to be part of. Gert then mentions that they will play before the night the competition starts. And as she does that, she picks up this barrel. This is the same barrel that we could see in episode 4 of season 1 on the Zeppelin. There it was used to hide Shimmer, but it still had the logo of Gragas on it. So this barrel likely has wine in it. In the next scene, Vander teases Powder that it's cool that she's getting Milo and Gert together, but every now and then she should fill her own cup, by which he means that she should get together with someone too. Of course, later we learn that she already is with someone, which is when Heimerdinger appears, and he notices that Ekko was scribbling the anomaly, meaning the Ekko he saw also came here from the other universe. By now, Ekko was just losing it and so he went outside, and he ends up barfing into a bin. Here we get a wide shot of the street we know very well. This is behind the last drop. For example, the other side of the street is where Smeech was hiding before he started following Jinx, and here you can notice a major difference in the environment. The ventilation systems in this universe are a lot cleaner and simpler, because the air here is quite a bit cleaner compared to the other universe. Anyway then, Heimerdinger follows Ekko out, and hints that they shouldn't tell anyone about the anomaly. It would have awkward consequences. And he confirms that they got scattered across time, which he then follows by saying that he has been here for 1128 days. Which is interesting because Piltover itself was only about 200 years old now. This was confirmed back in season 1. So Heimerdinger stayed here and he just casually relived history. In fact, if canon timeline still holds, Heimerdinger popped into this universe around the time the Ruination and the Rune Wars were happening. So then, Ekko asks about Jayce, and Heimerdinger tells him that Jayce likely ended up elsewhere, because the anomaly behaved differently around him. This is our first hint at his own storyline with Viktor. Next, Ekko learns that the Hextech was never invented here, and without the Hex Gate they couldn't recreate the anomaly to send them back, which is when Powder came in to tell them that she was going to see Vi. Fun fact, in this shot, we can see the bin where Powder got her very first chomper. And then the scene goes to Jayce in a different universe. Here we got the quote, "What have we done?" which keeps repeating in his head. As Jayce tries to lift up his hammer, we can see it glitches out. This could be because in this universe, all Hextech was twisted by the Arcane. What is awesome about this is that this also explains why the Hextech weapon started glitching out in episode 3. There, as Jayce was dealing with the anomaly at the Hex Gate, the other universe leashed out and glitched out all the weapons. Anyway, shortly after Jayce popped into this universe, he is met by our familiar mage, whom we now know is Viktor. So of course Jayce follows him, and he gets the first hint of what happened here. During this scene, we can hear the distorted version of the progress theme playing in the background, which was often used around Jayce and his inventions. Although this theme was also used to introduce Piltover in season 1, and so of course it keeps playing as the destroyed version of the city is revealed, showing us the world where Viktor and the Arcane had won. A couple of interesting things to note here. Here we can see the Bridge of Progress. We can see the corrupted Medarda headquarters. And the building right there is the Academy. So next, we go back to Powder and her hideout. Here it is funny to see that the hideout stays the same place regardless of what universe it is. But here you can see she doesn't have the carousel or the explosives on the right side, because she never got to collect anything from Jayce's lab. Also, we don't have any monkey tags or creepy drawings around, the centerpiece became a study room, and the couch area, which was used for the mannequins of dead Milo and Clagger, which was later turned into Isha's home, was now turned into Vi's memorial. When Ekko arrives, we get a close-up on some of the items here, and it is revealed that Powder is not only smart, but she also has an artistic talent. So here she has a self-portrait, but also on the other side we can see Clagger. Next to the table we can find quite a few Easter eggs. First of all, here we have the infamous monkey. But here it's harmless, it's just the toy that Vander used as an alarm in the last drop. In the back you can see the bunny ears. These are the very same ears that Isha wore in Act 2. And there is this picture of Powder with someone else. I'll be honest, I wasn't really sure who that person could be, but yes, it is most likely gonna be Ekko. The rest are just schematics for the capsules that she and Ekko were working on for the competition. In fact, in this scene, Powder revealed it was an energy storage device. And in this close-up shot, we can also see there is a body of a mechanical bird and some kind of a safe box. Ekko then grabs one of the cogs on the table, and I wonder if this is somehow related to the one that Viktor held when he talked about fate. Anyway, as the shot went wider, we can see instead of a hextech crystal, the monkey is now holding a brush. Also, it has Milo's angry face on it. And on the other side, there is an I love you letter, hinting that in this universe, the two are already together. But at this point, Ekko doesn't know that. Also, there is actually a crazy Ekko drawn here. We'll get a better shot of that one later. When the shot then goes to Vi's memorial, on the left we can see a painting of Powder. This is the same version which the Firelights drew on their memorial, and above the shrine we have clouds and a sun, kind of representing the heaven. And that is when it is properly revealed that Vi is dead. Because Powder always had a knack for making dolls for the dead. And as Ekko realizes what this means, we can see the Ekko drawing in the background, with a heart that also has Powder on it. But again, at this point, Ekko is oblivious to it. In the next shot, we can see Powder lighting an incense in front of Vi's picture. And you can see it also has the blue birds on it, which were always connected to Janna, the spiritual matron of Zaun. Ekko then asks about how she died. Of course, Powder is heavily confused, but she confirms that he gave them the tip, which is when it all clicked for him. Vi died during the hextech explosion you might remember from Season 1. Now, if you're asking about how that's possible, well, that all could be related to Jayce's storyline. This could be one of the universes where Jayce wasn't pushed into researching hextech, which means he wouldn't be there to knock on the door to alert Vi, since that is what happened in Season 1, which means Vi wouldn't run and she would just blow up. With that said, they wouldn't blow up if Powder didn't panic after Jayce knocked on the door, so there had to be a different reason for the crystal to get set off. Anyway, here, this also made Ekko realize, if Vi died here, hextech still had to be somewhere around that place. Before he leaves, in this scene, we can see one more picture, which shows us Powder, Vander, Milo, Clagger, and even young Vi. And yes, some of these candles are violet. And after Ekko stands up, you can see Vi's boxing gloves. On his way out, he picks up a bag full of tools. Here we can see Jayce's original hammer, the same one he used to test the hextech gems, but also that is the exact same spanner Savika used in episode 4 to fix her arm. In the last shot here, we can see a bunch of doodles in Powder's notebook of Ekko and Powder. After he leaves, he walks out into the world without hextech. And here you can see someone riding a monobike without an engine. This is the same one that was originally shown in the music video. And again, all the background characters are people we've seen before. Also yes, the wheel on the right has a bunch of real esports teams on it. There is Gen.G, Fnatic, T1, you name it. Ekko then stands on a tiny ledge. And the shot is framed in a similar way to how Jayce wanted to jump. That was before he ended up making hextech. However, the reason why Ekko stopped here is because this is where he fought Jinx on the bridge. We then get this wider shot of the kids chasing each other, and surprisingly, there is not much to point out here. Maybe besides that one sneaky tear of the goddess. And yes, one of the shops is selling a proper Poro snack, a cookie you actually use in-game on the Bridge of Progress to feed Poros. So next, here is a barbershop, and we can see the guy who scared Huck in the original episode 1. Jericho is still here with his shop that now looks much better, and he is still serving Herald from the academy, and the guy who does the Zeppelin inspections. In fact, this is a recreation of the exact same scene from Act 2. But then, after the shot reveals the now thriving bridge, we can see the banners of the Innovators contest, which is when country Heimerdinger starts to sing his song. As he does, the shots go between Jayce and Ekko, where Ekko is witnessing the thriving Piltover, and Jayce sees it devoid of life. Even here, he is where the harbor used to be, hence why the ships are around. In fact, it is possible these are the Noxian ships from episode 6, although most of them would be moved closer to the Hex Gates, since that is where the final battle happened. And all of this is happening after that. Then we get to see Jayce's lab in the alternative universe. You can see here it was still destroyed by the explosion, but they are already fixing up the hole. So Ekko goes in, he walks past the blackboard with all the runes, just like what we have seen in the first act, and in the meantime, Jayce keeps on going through the ruins of Piltover. In this scene we get a wider shot of Zaun, and you can notice some of the buildings that appeared in episode 6 of season 1. For example, that weird background fish statue is still there. But back at the explosion, Ekko picks up Jayce's hammer and he starts looking for the shards. Here we get a quick flashback of what happened and how Powder witnessed Vi's death. But eventually Ekko is successful in finding the shards, and we get a flashback showing how it devastated the entire group, including Marcus. Again, technically, this is all Ekko's fault for giving them the tip on this job. So here, it all became Ekko's redemption. The interesting thing here is, you can see Powder kept the other crystals, but we only learn what happened to those at the very end of this episode. Anyway, eventually Ekko gets all the shards, and on the other side, Jayce witnesses more of the horrors that happened after Viktor's victory. Here we get a scene of people trying to jump on the cable car to escape from Zaun. Ekko then starts working on the anomaly, and we can see he's doing it at the empty hideout, which would normally become the hideout of the Firelights. In fact, this specifically is the wall the Firelights used for the mural. Also, in this universe, all the Firelight bugs are replaced with dragonflies, and the tree is doing pretty well on its own. And then, Heimerdinger's song ends in front of the last drop, where we can see someone riding a working car. And on top of that, we can see Zaun started utilizing the glass houses with trees to produce air. In the other universe, this only happens later in modern Zaun. And finally, Jayce gets to meet some of Viktor's machines. The cool detail here is, some of these perfectly match the visions Jayce had in Act 2. So those weren't just Jayce getting visions of the people transforming, although that is true too. But on top of that, it was also a PTSD from this scene. But yes, running from these, Jayce trips, falls down, breaks his leg, and that's how his survivor story arc started. So back in the other universe, Ekko tells Heimerdinger he thinks he can recreate the anomaly. In the background you can see that the Chem sisters are putting up the decorations for the show, and Heimerdinger says he would help him, because he couldn't forsake a brilliant pupil again. By which he's referencing how he gave up on Jayce before. So the shot goes back to him. And there, Jayce gets his slight insanity arc, where he's trying to figure out how to get back up. So, being a man of science, he starts a fire, he snaps his leg back in place, he tries to survive off of the water that falls here from the stalactites, and that is where he gets his first flash of the mage watching him. Then he gives climbing up his first try but fails, after which we can see the hammer slowly corroding, as it is based on Hextech, and Hextech in this universe was completely twisted. In the next shot we can actually see more of the machines watching him from afar. It is not that they can't reach him, they simply do not attack. And of course that is because, now we know, they all follow Viktor, who doesn't have a reason to attack Jayce in this universe. He wants to lead him up to the top of the Hex Gate. And after that we can see that Jayce is indeed eating the local lizards, since he is at the bottom of the fissures. He is eating the same species of lizards which Singed turned into Rio. This was in fact confirmed by the co-creator of Arcane. Soon after that, Jayce also notices that he's being watched. So it seems like he's been marking how many days he's been here for, and he keeps on with the grind. He bursts into tears as he thinks about how he left Viktor behind, and he thinks of how Heimerdinger wanted to destroy the core. His body refuses to take any more lizards, although since these lizards are connected to Shimmer, it makes sense why these would set up Jayce into becoming a mage too. His broken leg then slowly starts getting infested and corrupted, and then it is revealed that he was not marking the days. He was figuring out the calculations around the anomaly. This is interesting because this could be the exact same thing that happened to Ekko. It is entirely possible Jayce drew all of these subconsciously. He then very quickly gets a flash from the future, which is a vision from Viktor that would lead him to the top of the Hex Gate. And the next time he looks up, the machines are gone. So using a piece of his old hammer, Jayce fixes his leg, and now, somehow he does have the strength and the will to get out of there. Maybe it was the juices inside the lizards that did this. In some of these shots, you can see it wasn't just a one-day trip. Jayce took many breaks in between to break out a camp, but eventually he got out of the very bottom of Zaun. But he was still not quite in Piltover. And you can see, the next time he rests, it almost looks like he's in the wing of a butterfly. But then we go back to Ekko. In his part, he led Powder to what was supposed to be the Firelight's hideout, and he painted Vi all over the mural. This makes sense, the mural was for the dead, and in this universe, Vi was the only one missing. When Powder asks about this, Ekko mentions this is a painting based on a dream he had. Of course, he is talking about our universe, but again, Heimerdinger told him that revealing he is from another universe would have awkward consequences. So after telling her about Vi, Ekko also points out that he thinks Powder has ideas that could change the world. Again, these are based on the other universe, and you can see Powder actually thinks about it, but she doesn't want to change the life she has here. This makes sense considering what she could have become. But Ekko nudges her by saying, sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving a few things behind. So finally, this scene ends with Powder asking what does Ekko really want from her. A tease that they are going to make the Z drive. Back at Jayce, we can now see he is at the sump level. This is where Viktor originally grew up, and some of these holes might be the windows where Jayce, Viktor and Heimerdinger had many conversations. So next, Jayce is in the final stretch. And now he realizes that he's walking past the machines that are not aggressive. Then we can see him on what seems to be the destroyed Bridge of Progress. Here I absolutely love how Arcane keeps its sense of 3D space, because the layout still matches the reveal from the beginning. So, back at Ekko, him and Heimerdinger brief Powder on the invention they want to make. Here we get a wider shot of the last drop, including the dart game with the scores. And you can see they also have a small drawing of Vi and Powder on it. And yes, on the other side, the billiard table is still there. You may recognize it from Vi's battle with Savika. Then Ekko started joining Powder in mourning Vi, and Heimerdinger was just happy to see the two thrive. Also, he's just bringing his banjo everywhere, I guess. And that is where the three geniuses try to figure out how to kickstart the anomaly. And throughout this process, there is just a lot of setups of Ekko and Powder being together. Heimerdinger then brings up the schematics, and here we can see the original Z drive. The capsule is right in the middle, and it has the infinity loop, which you'll see appear later on. And notice how the schematics are numbered too. This is 5 followed by 6, with 6 likely showing the cord you're supposed to pull to start it. Even though, on their prototype, it looks slightly different. Also, at the bottom right, there is the little disc that Ekko previously took from Powder's lab. Then we also get this quick shot of the mechanical keyboard, where you may see some of the runes match what appears when Hextech is charged. In fact, that one looks like the sorcery rune. Next, Jinx is fixing the little disc, and she is still not questioning Ekko taking it, I guess. Then we get a wider shot of the machine, so now we can see how the keyboard connects to it. But more importantly, notice that Ekko cranks it, just like Jace and Viktor cranked their original experiment. After that, the disc is used to hold the shards, they plug in the machine, a shot that is quite close to the one Powder shot from Season 1, and the machine blows up a bit. So they recalibrate it, and instead of cranking it, they pull it, then they plug it in, and some anomalies start to glitch out. We can then see that Powder looks into the time anomaly notes, and here we can see it hints at the same person having the ability to cross over. The important thing to notice here, the rune at the bottom is the same rune on the gem which Viktor gave to Jayce. And after looking into this, it is teased that Powder started noticing something, which is further underlined by the next scene where Powder looks at Ekko almost suspiciously. During the next test, they enhanced their invention with a quick monkey animation. I'm not sure how important that one was though, but finally they succeeded and they created a small anomaly. One that quickly destroyed itself, which, to be fair, Viktor mentioned it would. As that happens, we can see Ekko with a reflection of Powder fading in, referencing that he is still not in the universe where he belongs. So Ekko then carves up an entirely new rune we haven't seen before, and they start slotting these new runes into the machine. Curiously enough though, the last two runes we see here are the new rune Ekko made, and on the other side we can see the rune Viktor gave to Jayce. So now, with the new setup, it was time to set the limit, and then let the anomaly rip. In that moment, they were successful. Now it was time to utilize it. So Ekko rips the cord, because that is always how he started the Z drive in the game, and this lights up the runes he slotted in. The anomaly grows, it splits into 5 copies, just like how Jayce split into 5 when he fired at Viktor, and that is when Ekko got into the loop, which is when something really cool happens. Ekko explains he figured this out by playing with the inversion of Jayce's acceleration rune. Of course, the inversion of acceleration wouldn't be deceleration, that would be just slowing down. The inversion would be accelerating in the other direction, or in this case, going back in time. So while Ekko may be saying scientific mambo-jumbo, if you listen to what he said, it makes complete sense. Also, when Ekko mentions Jayce's acceleration rune, he circles this one, and this is once again the same rune Viktor gave to Jayce. So now we actually have a name for that rune. Anyway, next, they try to push the invention and go back in time further, and now we can see that it is all based on that one acceleration rune. In fact, if you go frame by frame, as the shot goes past the rune, it gets inverted, which again is what Ekko is doing here. It then starts a loop around the anomaly, and it twists into the infinity, just like what was shown in the notes. For some reason, the force of the anomaly also starts up the monkey on the table, and we get this shot of Powder surrounded by hextech runes, which could be a reference to episode 3 of season 1. In a way, this reveals that Powder is starting to understand what's happening, but also combined with the monkey, it is a shot quite close to the original episode 3. But more importantly, this is the first time they managed to evoke the exact same runes the mage used. Which of course are also the same runes which came out of Viktor and Jayce's first experiment. And it makes sense that it is connected to the anomaly, since, well, those runes belong to Viktor. So Ekko tries to reach its limit, and as he approaches the 5th second, Heimerdinger explodes. If you're wondering why he explodes while everything else is fine, that's because Yordles are essentially made out of magic. There is a higher chance something would go wrong with them around the Arcane. And so, Ekko marks 4 seconds as a limit using a red crayon. From this point on, this red mark will be used on every device. So Ekko then wants to keep going until they make the anomaly to jump between universes. And Heimerdinger mentions he knows how to give the device a boost. But before they do that, Heimerdinger takes the device and tells Ekko to attend the party first. As he lifts up the capsule, you can see the acceleration rune at the bottom, and the reverse acceleration rune at the top. So then we get back to Jayce, who is climbing to the top of the hex gate. And here things get really cool. We know that this universe is one where Viktor won, which means even though this is still episode 7, the final battle from episode 9 already happened here. You can see the time shown on the clockwork tower matches this battle too. So if you look at the background, here you can see Jinx's ship crashed into the tower. This is exactly what you'll see later in episode 9. But watching this first, of course, you would have no idea what this even is. Now, there is a slight contradiction with this. In the universe where Viktor wins, Ekko likely doesn't have the Z drive, so Jinx is likely going to kill herself. Which means this ship shouldn't be here. However, if Jayce didn't travel to the future, he wouldn't have a reason to kill Viktor. In fact, there is a hint that Viktor didn't get blasted in this universe, because if this is the Viktor who won, he doesn't have the mask that popped up after he was saved by Warwick's blood. And therefore, he didn't get blasted by Jayce in the first place. Which means the entire Vander storyline would be much more straightforward, Isha wouldn't die, and Jinx wouldn't get suicidal. Sure, you could argue that this battle would happen from a totally different perspective, but hey, that's the fun of dealing with time travel stories. Also, if you compare this to what happened in the final battle, there the ship crashed entirely through. So this is a slightly different outcome of the battle where they win. So really, this is more of a reference rather than an accurate point in the story. Because who knows how many versions of this battle happened. Anyway, a little bit later on, you can see an even better shot of the propeller ship. But finally, Jayce gets to the very top and he looks back. The awesome thing about this shot is, this is a reverse shot of the introduction from the beginning. You can see the same buildings such as the Bridge of Progress or the Medarda headquarters. So somewhere back there is where he stood at the beginning of this sequence. Now back at Ekko's pre-party before the Inventor competition, we can see people presenting their inventions, such as the thing that somehow really looks like the inspiration rune thing. Then there is whatever that is. It kinda looks like a seismograph or a lie detector. And yes, they do have a working pinball machine in the background. Then there is also a punch bowl, really setting up the American prom night vibe. And we get to see Clagger explaining his invention too. Ekko then has a talk with Banzo. And we can see he's now wearing the Academy badge, which he didn't before. And during this talk, the two hug, because Ekko doesn't think he'll have time to talk to him the next day. He is planning to leave this universe after all, and soon after that, Silco pops up. And surprisingly, he got his eye fixed. This is because, even though Hextech was never invented here, and I'm not really sure what the production of Shimmer looks like here, in this universe, people just have a way better healthcare. So Ekko is surprised because he knows Silco and Vander tried to kill each other. And he learned that did indeed happen, but they forgave each other. Which means this is likely the universe where Silco found Vander's ladder in the mines. But then the party begins. We can see Gert is about to play some music. And the music disc shows a beautiful crane and a dark red bird fighting over a skull. This could unironically be a reference to the potential Noxian invasion of Ionia. Although at this point in the story, it did not happen yet. So it is just a reference. So Gert then turns into a DJ. Here in the front we can see Deckard. During this party, Milo and Clagger were shown together, and of course this sparked some interesting theories. In fact, it was confirmed, and I quote, "Anything can happen in an alternative universe." Although, even though anything can happen, just remember that Milo was still hitting on Gert before. And then Powder made an entrance. From this point on, yes, the scene is shot in 4 frames per second. Which is not only used to give this feeling of Ekko's memories, which he's gonna remember forever, as he references later on, but also it matches the 4-second limit of his Z drive. Also, I counted the frames myself, and it seems like it is not perfect 4 frames per second. It fluctuates around 4.1. And now I wonder what's the technical reason for that. Anyway, in the next scene, we can see Ekko and Powder sitting above Piltover. In fact, it is the same place where Powder and Vi sat back in the first episode of Arcane. In the following scene, as Ekko mentions, he previously gave up on Zaun and Powder. She gives him back the line, sometimes taking a leap forward means leaving some things behind. And in a way, it almost seems like she is aware of what's really happening. And before the time bomb ship happens, Ekko says, "Can we pretend like this is the first time?" What he's most likely saying is that Powder and the other Ekko are together in this universe. The chances are they kissed before, as was teased in Jinx's lab. But to our Ekko, this was the first time. and so they kiss as well. Which then gets interrupted by Jayce getting into the eye of the Arcane storm. The interesting thing here is that as he does that, for the first time, the Arcane also gives us a video corruption. We have not seen this effect before, and they almost break the fourth wall. But after he gets out of the storm, we can see the clear sky and a dragonfly. This is a reference to Jayce's flashback. There, after they got out of the snowstorm, they got greeted by a butterfly. And of course, this is where Jayce got to meet himself. Now, if you are wondering how is it possible that one person is in the same universe twice, well, at the end of Arcane, it is kinda teased that all of these are husks now, and their souls are gone. Meanwhile, Powder got a gift from Ekko. It is a pendant of a flower, but if you look closer, you can see Powder's and Ekko's face on it. Also, one side of the pendant is blue and the other one is grey, referencing the two connected universes. And as he spins it, we get the same video glitch breaking the fourth wall, indicating we are about to get back to the Arcane in our universe. Of course, this glitch started happening because Heimerdinger upgraded the Z drive. It was now a fully sized bubble. Back in the destroyed universe, the dragonfly, still mimicking the original butterfly, landed on future Jayce. Our Jayce then falls on his knee and he directly mimics the pose. You can also see this entire shot is framed by the bubble from the explosion that happens during the battle here. This next shot is then what we saw in Jayce's vision in episode 6. It is then perfectly mirrored to show Jayce in the same spot, and now, as if he appeared out of thin air, the mage is back. It happened right as Jayce realized this was the moment the end of Piltover began, and he started questioning why did he ever give him the runestone. Of course, at this point we still don't know that the mage is Viktor, but you can see this connection being teased, because both the mage and Jayce keep getting framed in the same way. For example, the mage is framed by the machine's head here, and in the next shot, so is Jayce. Next, it all very quickly cuts back to Ekko, who now turned the Z drive into a standalone device. You can also see they gave it its own dial, but this one is different from the original despite having the exact same red mark for the limit. Also, the monkey stayed as part of the device. So he rips it again, and because it is connected to higher power on both sides, the Z drive is essentially overclocked now. As he starts it, you can see the faint infinity loop inside it. And as the shot zooms out, we can see this place is the end of the propeller in Powder's hideout. It's the one that had the carousel and the explosives in the other universe. So even this place is making a full loop. And so Heimerdinger sends the Z drive into overdrive, the anomaly splits again, and it grows much bigger, only being bound by the energy field Heimerdinger built. The amazing detail here, which most people will miss, is that as the anomaly passes around Ekko and Heimerdinger, every time you look through it, you can see our version of these characters. It is really tiny, but for example, this is a screenshot that perfectly shows the two versions of Ekko, and since only the glasses are new on Heimerdinger, here's a shot of the glasses being split. Our version of Heimerdinger didn't have them. So Jayce then tells the mage to send him back. And so he touches the shoulder of Jayce's husk, which turns the husk's eye towards the hand and then back to look at Jayce, since at this point all the glorious evolved are linked. And the husk then releases the hammer. Back at the lab, Heimerdinger says his famous line from the game, "Never a dull moment," and he jumps away to complete the overclock. Meanwhile, Powder arrived to see it all happen. So just like in the previous experiments, he pulls the levers to start it. And he goes in to plug in the power. But before he does, for the last time we go to Jayce, who says, "I won't fail." The same line that kept repeating in his head in episode 6. And the mage does his teleportation again. But now, instead of the globe being the world in his palm, he's not traveling through space, but through time. So now it was turned into the anomaly. The amazing thing here is, if you compare this to the end of episode 3, where the anomaly scattered them across universes. Well, now it is obvious it was Viktor who did that on purpose. That's why Heimerdinger mentioned that the anomaly behaved around Jayce differently. Also, that's why Jayce saw the vision of the mage again with the anomaly. It's because Viktor threw Jayce here on purpose. Anyway, the two then get engulfed, and as that happens, the acceleration rune absorbs the magic of the anomaly, and it fuses with his body. This is an incredibly important moment that comes back at the end of Arcane. Just remember, it was Viktor who fused the rune with Jayce's body. We then also got this shot, which was yet again used for one of the visions in episode 6. But now back at the lab, Heimerdinger plugs in the power and he vanishes. And it really seems like he didn't die. He simply jumped realities. And who knows where he ended up. So then we get more of the creepy shots from the mage. All of these were visions too, and Jayce finally travels back to his universe. And back in the lab, Powder witnessed Heimerdinger's vanishing act, and she picks up her own Ekko, just as our version of Ekko is about to leave. The reason why this happened at all is because, again, according to the notes we saw before, only one person can occupy a universe at a time. So if you jump into another dimension, you're taking over the body of yourself that's already there. And in this scene, as Ekko is leaving, we can hear the theme of the Bridge of Progress, which is often used for Powder's character development. As Ekko vanishes too, we can once again see a butterfly. After which, the other Ekko wakes up. He has no idea what happened, and Powder figures it all out. This episode then ends with Powder cranking Vi's doll, because the entire time the doll was a music box. She then quickly looks behind her to see if someone is watching, and she presses a hidden button that opens up a drawer. Inside, you can see she kept all of the hex crystals. These were the same ones we saw her hold as a child in the universe where Vi died. And she places the pendant right next to these. This is all opened up to interpretation. But it is hinting at the fact that one day Powder might try to jump into the other universe. Or at the very least, in this universe, she is the one who comes up with Hextech. But that's where episode 7 ends. At the beginning of episode 8, Mel pops out of the Black Rose Pocket Realm as a proper mage. Once again, her back goes gold, a parallel shot to the finale of Arcane 1. And from this point on, every time her power is unleashed, it is somehow related to a form of a bubble. Once she drops to the ground, the golden magic keeps radiating from her back. Looking at the tattoos, they resemble a combination of Noxian and Shuriman designs, although the magic itself is very celestial, so the real origin still might be Targon, with Shurima being a proxy. In this room, you can notice the Noxian pillars with chains. If they remind you of Briar from League of Legends, that's because Briar is also heavily linked to the Black Rose. Also, this setup suggests that everything that happened to Mel was an illusion in her head, while the entire time she might have been chained here, or at the very least restrained in some form. Unless this is a portal somehow. Because yes, that is a rose drawn on the floor. But more importantly, if you look at where we are, this is the same room you may remember from Mel's flashback back in Season 1. That is the place which Noxus conquered, where they had to execute the girl connected to royalty. And so, in the next shot, LeBlanc, being a master of disguises and illusions, uses that girl as an appearance to mess with Mel. Unironically, this may also tease that the girl was just a setup from the Black Rose 2. But the entire Black Rose is likely a setup for what League wants to do next, so there is not much to explain here. The one detail you may notice, however, is that in this form, LeBlanc is wearing the necklace which she later gives to Mel. She then assumes her shadow form, which is an entirely new appearance we haven't seen LeBlanc use before, and then she shifts between people which Mel knows, such as Kino while still wearing the necklace, but then she swaps to Ambessa to reveal that she is the one who killed Mel's brother, because Ambessa crossed them, and that's when the necklace is gone. Which is also true after she swaps to Mel herself. And then something really important happens which a lot of people overlook. LeBlanc simply tells Mel what is going to happen to Piltover if Viktor is left unchecked. She mentions a calamity is approaching, rivaling the ancient Rune Wars. Of course, the Rune Wars are a big lore event that shaped a lot of League's history, which happened roughly 1,000 years before Arcane. Anyway, LeBlanc mentions that this calamity would destroy the city. Ambessa would be at the helm, blinded by her thirst for legacy, which explains why she would be dumb enough to team up with Viktor, whom she could never defeat herself. In fact, that actually happens later in the battle. After which, the shot shows us Viktor in the moment of victory, at the very top of the Hex Gate. She also mentions that they tried to stop Ambessa before, but they failed. By this, she's referencing the one scene with the head of the Merchant Guild. Mel hesitates because she always believed her mother had always only done the best for her family. And LeBlanc revealed Kino thought that too, until he discovered Ambessa's secret. The secret that Mel's birth was no accident. It wasn't just a love affair, as we learned in Act 2. Instead, Ambessa had Mel as a living weapon. The scene then ends with LeBlanc shifting back to the girl, and she gives the necklace to Mel, who accepts it, and in a way, she becomes part of the Black Rose. As she does that, the necklace glows with power, and there is a raven that transitions us into the next cut. This raven is likely not Swain spying on the Black Rose. That wouldn't really work with the current timeline, but it could be the Demon of Secrets, Raum, directly. The last thing we see here is this. Honestly, it is extremely hard to guess where this is. But if this is the same place Noxus conquered in Mel's flashback, it has to be around the edges of the Empire. It could be the Freljordian borders, such as the Dalamor Plains, as Ambessa previously mentioned in Act 1, or it could be something closer to Piltover and Zaun, something around Rockrund, which was Ambessa's home. Regardless, we are still not entirely sure how Mel gets back to Piltover. It could be portals with the help of the Black Rose, or, as you'll see later, it is more likely that she just took a ship. In the next scene, we can see Ambessa holding a burial for Rictus. Here, you may notice the black runes on his body. These are quite similar to the runes on the Keenik Rukern, so it is likely they protect Rictus from magic being performed on his body. And maybe it also prevents LeBlanc from taking on his appearance. Singed then attaches the tubes to Vander to prime him up with the same green liquid that kept him alive before. And since this scene happened after his blood was turned into hot goop, you may notice that as his blood drips into the water, it sizzles, showing us it is still hot. That may be why there is so much steam here. Also, you may notice his entire arm was shredded by Isha's Hextech explosion. And then we can see Singed attach another hose to his body from the other side. This one might be important later. We get a quick shot of Ambessa taking the Rukern off of Rictus' spear, after which we get to Viktor's cocoon. One of many possible references to butterflies being the main theme of Viktor and Jayce. Or rather, the anomaly in general. Anyway, Singed extracts a bit of Viktor's blood. And you can even see the Arcane of the cocoon reacts the same way it originally reacted to Mel in Act 1. After which Singed confirms he couldn't save Rictus. We then learned that Vander's blood is now being directly pumped into Viktor. Because of course, Vander's blood has regenerative properties. Just like it was mentioned in their previous conversation. Though at this point, Vander's blood supply is quite low. So it makes Viktor wake up, but it does not give him his full strength. Still, Viktor immediately thanks Singed for saving him. Viktor then speaks through his subjects. You can see his fingerprints glowing on their foreheads, which is when it was revealed that this unity in all is what he called the glorious evolution. However, he could feel he was still slowly dying. The blood supply he got from Vander now wasn't enough. But Viktor confirmed that the anomaly under the Hex Gates had the capacity to finish the task. What he's talking about is the transformation of everyone into the unified glorious evolution. However, Jayce's attack made him too weak to get there himself. And so, exactly like LeBlanc mentioned, this is when Ambessa got arrogant and she made a deal with Viktor. She would deliver Viktor to the Hex Gates, and in turn he would empower all of her soldiers. What she didn't realize is that Viktor would transform everyone into unified husks. And during this conversation, you can see the framing of how small Ambessa and Singed are compared to the power they are trying to deal with, which is represented by Viktor. The scene then goes to the aftermath of Isha's explosion on the battlefield. We can see Caitlyn waking up Vi, and she gets interrupted by Jayce. Fun fact, at that point, Jayce has been missing in action for a while. So it's funny to see him just randomly stumble upon Caitlyn out of all people. But eventually, Vi wakes up, with Loris taking care of her. Vi tried to stand up, but she couldn't, because her stomach got sliced. You could actually see that happen during the battle in episode 6. Next we get to Caitlyn's office, where she's figuring out the battle plan. Here we can see the Noxian ships are approaching the Hex Gates, because they want to get Viktor inside. And Maddie suggests that they should try to negotiate with them. Of course, this may be because secretly Maddie might be taking a liking to the Noxians. So Vi then marches in, and she's mad that Caitlyn arrested Jinx. So she sends Maddie away to check on her father, so she could talk to Vi privately. But of course, that doesn't happen with Maddie behind the door. Anyway, in this conversation, Caitlyn is mad at Vi because she told Jinx to protect her. And she thought that was because Vi didn't trust Caitlyn would follow through on taking down Singed. All of that happened in episode 6. Vi lashed back that Caitlyn was poisoned by Ambessa's hunger for conquest, and Caitlyn agreed. In this scene, if you take a look at the map, you can see all the leads to Jinx were taken off of the board, because they got her locked up. Instead, you can only see the ships now. So Vi leaves, and Caitlyn goes to visit Jinx in the prison cell. But from this shot, you can see she is not in the Stillwater Hold. Not only was that place destroyed by Warwick, but also Ambessa took control of that island. So instead, this is the same elevator that took us down to the meeting below the council. So the new prison is down there. In fact, when we have a look at this shot of Caitlyn approaching Jinx's cell, we can see this is the exact same place from episode 1, but there were no bars in the background. So these dungeons were converted into cells. When Caitlyn pushes in a new tray of food, it bumps into the old one that is still full, revealing that Jinx refuses to eat. When we then get a look at Jinx, she is a total wreck. It was never directly mentioned, but of course this is because of Isha, whom she said was a person who kept her together, and now she was dead. So Jinx then completely gave up on everything. Of course her hair is just wild now, because why would she care about giving it a form? So Caitlyn then goes hard on her, saying that no amount of good deeds could undo their crimes, and Jinx doesn't reply, because she agrees. So next the shot goes back to the Raven, and here it is already teased that it is Raum, because the Raven has the black spots where the other two eyes should be. With the Raven being here because it is still following Mel, whom you can see here getting back into Piltover. And she's crossing a bridge in the harbors, with the thing on the left heavily resembling a ship. So it is likely she sailed back here. Next, we hop into the council room where Jayce was. And we can see how after the destruction of this room, there was a small area that got untouched. Also, instead of completely replacing the destroyed table, they fixed it using gold, keeping the history of these events intact. What's interesting though is that now we can see 3 seats got saved by Mel's magic, with those being Mel, Jayce, but the third one belonged to Heimerdinger, who wasn't present during the explosion. But if he was, Mel would have saved him too. Even though in theory, the Yordles are immortal. We can then see Jace's hammer reacting to something, and that is when Mel entered the room. Of course, now we know the hammer did not react to Mel, but rather something else. The two then have a conversation, not as counselors, but as mages, with Mel being touched by the Arcane, as LeBlanc puts it, and Jayce having the Arcane crystal fused with his body. This is also when Jayce finally addresses the fact that for the most of their time, he knew he was just an investment in Mel's eyes. He and Viktor were used to create Hextech, nothing more. Mel defends herself by saying that she saw 2 brilliant inventors who carried magic from myth to machine, rallying the hope and hearts of a nation. which is when Jayce snaps and fires at one of Viktor's machines behind Mel. The point being, everything Mel said before this happened is exactly what Viktor is still doing now. A brilliant inventor who carried magic from myth to machine by creating these machines and rallying the hearts of a nation by uniting them with the glorious evolution. And that's where Viktor, controlling one of his machines, enters the room. Now previously, Viktor used Huck as his speaking vessel. And here, if you look at the design of this one, you can see this is what Huck has become. Here's a direct comparison of the face marks, the shoulder pad, the necklace, and the neck brace. In fact, this transformation was foreshadowed when Huck was lifted into the air by Viktor. But of course, when you watch the show the first time, you have no idea what that means. Well, now it was revealed, that means you're getting turned into a machine. But that also means, in the last scene where all the followers were lifted into the air, Viktor had just enough power to transform them. So in the upcoming war, all the machines are the followers from the Utopia. But we are skipping ahead. In this scene, Viktor first wants to just talk, but Jayce refuses to give him the chance. He knew Viktor had to be destroyed to prevent the apocalypse. Here, Viktor confirmed that he just wanted to get to the Hex Gate peacefully. Otherwise, Ambessa would do it with brute force. During this fight, Mel uses her protective power. Viktor recognizes she was touched by the Arcane, and since the machines are made with the Arcane, it can just pass through. Shortly after this, Viktor also says that the chain of events started with Jayce. Which is true! In fact, that's the point of the entire time loop that happens later. As he says that, you can see Jayce's hammer glitch out with the time anomaly. But eventually, Viktor managed to tap into Jayce's mind and he tried to team up as partners again. But Jayce said his partner died in this room. By this, he's referencing that Viktor literally died here in Jinx's explosion. In that scene in episode 1, Viktor wasn't even breathing. So Jayce fights back, Viktor manages to grab him by the neck, and interestingly enough, while he's holding him, from the celestial perspective, Viktor sees something next to him. And I'll be honest, I still have no idea what that is. Maybe it is Viktor seeing a bit of the Arcane inside Jayce, because Jayce now had the crystal in his body implanted there by Viktor. But before we could learn what that was, Mel goes in, which allowed Jayce to charge up the hammer, with the force being so strong for a few frames. You can see it snapped Jayce's leg brace. And from Viktor's perspective, since the hammer itself is a time anomaly, it sucked in the universe around it. Remember this? It is actually a really important detail, with the final blast having an AoE pulse, which you may simply recognize from the game. The body of the machine then starts glitching with the same time anomaly, which we saw around Heimerdinger in Ekko's alternative universe. In the final moment, we can also see the machine lets tears drip out, which one could argue are the last shreds of humanity leaving the husk, but realistically it is just some kind of space oil, I guess. In fact, later you will see every time something around the glorious evolution is destroyed, it drips. So, Viktor is left defeated, and he is approached by Sky, who knows what's coming next, as Viktor gives the order to Singed to begin the final transformation, since negotiation with Jayce was no longer possible. We then go to Jinx, who somehow still got her Hextech gem, because that's what her identity has always been about, but it is heavily implied it is only in her head. And in this state of giving up on everything, she got one final voice from Silco in her head. Here, Silco has a blue eye, as in Jinx's head, it is the Hextech gem that is making these connections to her past. And here, the monologue is mostly about the circle of killing, with the most important line brought up here being, I think the cycle only ends when you find the will to walk away. After which she swallows, and then she spits out a Hextech gem. She holds out her hand while catching nothing. A chain of events that should be impossible, which is why the gem is likely in her head. But that quickly gets interrupted by Vi, who rushes to free her, and tries to convince her to rewrite her story just like she did in Zaun. Though Jinx slams her in the stomach and escapes, locking Vi in as she's ready to break the cycle. Fun fact, in this prison, Jinx mentions, "You deserve to be with her." And of course, we all know what scene happens in the prison next. Though before that, in her anger, behind the bars, Vi punches the wall. A callback to her punching the walls back in the prison of Stillwater. Anyway, then there is a very quick scene of Mel and Jayce talking about magic and the Medarda family. And Jayce mentions there is no force in the world that could control her. Foreshadowing Viktor, kinda controlling everyone through the Arcane. So next we get to the council room, where everyone witnesses what Jayce and Mel fought. Here we can find the same houses who were present during Caitlyn's rise to the dictator status. But also we can see some representatives from Zaun, including Sevika on behalf of the United Streets and Scar for the Firelights. Jayce then walks in and says that they don't have much time, that the storm is coming. This is not only referencing the war, but also the literal arcane storm that Viktor is about to bring. And so Jayce gives them all a brief on what's happening with Viktor and the Noxians, which is where we get a shot of this guy. A guy at a piano in Piltover that's not Jin. I know Arcane can retcon a lot, but Jin is from a different continent and part of a different storyline that happens a decade after Arcane. He is the outcome of what happens with Noxus next, so calm down. It is just a common man who was called into war. So in this scene, this was his last time playing music. Next we can see the enforcers building a barricade. Again, this is a direct callback to Marcus doing the same thing in the first season, except instead of Marcus, we have Stab in charge. But on the other side, they are also tearing down the checkpoints leading to Zaun, because everyone is allowed to either flee the city or join in and fight for it. And as we have a look at these common people, just try to remember some of them because they all come back eventually. So here we have a bit of a gothic family, we have people closing the shops as they flee, and we also get this shot. While everyone is fleeing the fissures, you can see they are heading towards the cable car. If we go back to the alternative universe where Viktor won, you can see the exact same scene, except everyone got caught in the middle of trying to escape. Also, once again, in the crowd you may recognize some people, such as the same fish lady with the mohawk that keeps coming back, or the guy who keeps reappearing who was in the alternative universe. Then we also get some members of the main houses who also decided to flee, while a lot of the common citizens stayed to learn how to fight. Of course, here we get Loris showing them some lessons. And in the back, you may notice the piano guy. For a bit, we can also see that Sevika and Stab left to consider the situation too. We can then see that the cable car is slowly getting full, which would explain why in the apocalypse people just couldn't make it. We also go back to the family we saw before, but in the next shot the mother and the daughter are fleeing, while the father stays behind to fight. We then get a shot of the enforcers setting up the barricades, again on the bridge, which is again a direct recreation of the very same scene from Season 1. The piano guy then got properly equipped as a soldier. We then get a quick glance of what would be used as a hextech cannon, and we can see Jayce teaching Loris how to use it. There is also a lot of zeppelins leaving the city now, and we can see Gerd boarding one of these. But while on board, she looks outside, she sees all the people who need to get out more than her, including the old shop owner we saw moments ago. And yes, there is also a lady owning a Poro as a pet. Though I kinda doubt that is Heimerdinger's old Poro, even though that Poro is still somewhere in the lab. After which there is a quick shot of the hex gate being used to shoot out a zeppelin. But it was revealed that Gerd hopped off, and now she was heading to Piltover to join the fight, alongside the father of the family and the one guy which Vi fought in the Piltover Boxing League. Meanwhile, Jayce is staying at the Hex Core to directly defend it. And that is where we get the one prison scene. It begins as a reference to the first time Caitlyn visited her in the cell in Season 1. After Caitlyn opens the cell, we can see Vi's bruised knuckle from hitting the wall. After which, Caitlyn kinda reveals that she called off the guards on purpose to allow Vi to try and convince Jinx to join them. But of course, it didn't work, and then the scene begins. I'll be honest, there is not much to point out here, though here you can see that Vi was sliced in episode 6. So then we go back to Viktor's Utopia. We get a shot of the mark Ambessa originally put down when they sieged this place. Here we can see Ambessa charging the runes again in the same ritual which Rictus previously performed. In this scene, Mel was visiting her mother. And as she's being escorted here, you can see the graves, including the one where Rictus was buried in the background. After getting a closer shot, you can see that is his glaive. Anyway, then Mel confirms Ambessa. She mentions she knows about the Black Rose, and she asks what really happened to Kino. Ambessa confirms that Kino was involved in dealings of the Black Rose, and so he died. It was all just so Mel could live. In this scene, for the first time in the entire series, we can see Ambessa cry a single tear, but nothing more. Mel then offered that Ambessa should leave Piltover because the city has nothing to do with it. But if she did so, Mel would join her. But Ambessa told her that these mages are far too powerful to be left alone. And she ties the magic protective runes around her hand. She then tells Mel she found another way to handle the situation, which is where she revealed the army that may never fear death. Ironically, she likely doesn't know that these machines, once evolved, are not really even alive. And among these machines, all of whom are the previous citizens of this utopia, you can see Viktor's cocoon is also hovering now. And then Mel asks, "What have you done, mother?" And the scene goes back to show us what happened. So after Jayce defeated the machine, Viktor told Singed to begin the process. At that point, Vander was now back full of the green liquid, which was primed with this regenerative power. We get a quick shot of Sky saying goodbye, we can see Singed opening a valve that lets the liquid drain out, and as that happens, the bodies of Viktor and Sky start to disappear, hinting at a link between the liquids and these two. But while Viktor is covered in a shadow, Sky is covered in some kind of bright magic. After this, we can see black liquid draining out of the main tank. Viktor says the famous line that he's going to miss their talks, and Sky shuts it down by saying, "No, you won't." As she does that, the magic almost gives her angelic wings. After which, she disappears and the shot directly transitions into the light pink liquid, with the added detail being that here, Sky's voice had the same voice filter which Viktor had when he was talking through the machine. There is a really cool theory surrounding this. It seems like the show is teasing that Sky was extracted separately. She was turned into the pink liquid, which happens to be the same one Singed is injecting into his daughter Oriana. So the reason why after Viktor is defeated, Oriana stays alive is possibly because Singed injected Sky into her, so that she can still live even when Viktor is gone. This gets further supported by another thing that was indirectly confirmed. It was mentioned that it is likely that the Sky Viktor sees is just a manifestation of the hex core itself in Viktor's mind. In other words, Sky is the hex core. In this case, the exact same thing happens, just with different context. It would be Singed extracting the hex core from Viktor to let Oriana live. That is just a theory though, but there is a lot of details hinting at it. Anyway, Singed then wakes up Vander using the serum from before. It's the same one that turned his blood into yellow mess. And he's then pumping his blood into Viktor, which gave Viktor the strength to take over everyone's bodies and make them all part of the glorious evolution. From Vander's perspective, you can see how the remnant of humanity in these machines gets overwritten. That's why his memories of the past start vanishing here. And eventually the memory of Vander that remained in his eyes turns dark, just like Viktor's new body, which indicates how Viktor entirely dominates his subjects. After which, Vander's expression goes numb. That was the moment Vander fully died, and we can see the yellow blood entering Viktor's cocoon. Viktor regaining his strength, all his subjects now essentially become puppets, hinted by the strings of light above them, and we get a hint that all of this is likely linked to some kind of celestial power. And for just a little bit, we can see Vander's body rising too. Then we can see everyone's bodies transforming. We can see one of them getting the crown that looks like a halo. And we can see even Viktor's body is not an exception to this evolution. His own body is transforming through the same magic. There is also a quick shot of Vander's body quickly regenerating, and it all ends with the badass shot of the Arcane itself tearing through Viktor's humanity, as it splits his face open, and the Herald of the Arcane is born. Of course, this can be linked to the fact that the Hex core was also teased to be alive. So if anything, this can be showing us the remnant of the Hex core winning, as it takes over Viktor. But that would be a whole another rabbit hole that gets even more complex in the next episode. So, while that is it for episode 8, let's now go into the grand finale of episode 9. Episode 9 begins with Jinx not in her cell anymore. We can see she is back in Zaun. Specifically, the window behind her is the one that was always seen in Silco's office. And what some people haven't realized is that in this scene, her hair is already cut. That is what is shown in this scene. She stands up, but her hair is left on the ground. Again, remember, this is all happening in Silco's office, who was the one who was previously styling her hair, and now she was getting rid of it. She then takes petrol, I assume, and she's ready to literally burn her past to the ground. She would make it all vanish as if it never existed, which is why she is spilling it all over the bar and Silco's office, including the chair. After which she lights a match and stands in the darkness for a bit. The last time she did this, she witnessed the reunion of her family. But now, she's ending it all. And it begins with the burning of Silco's chair, which was the same chair she was often talking with. Of course, the bar then quickly follows, and soon the entire last drop is on fire, which really made me realize something. Can we at least have the ruins of the last drop in the MMO? A window then blows up from the explosion and the glass reflects Jinx. You can see the shards also form a jaw around her. This could be foreshadowing for her ending with Vander. Then she got back into her hideout and she was ready to make everyone forget her. Here, I have to say, it is not entirely clear where she got the Hextech gem. Isha used 3 of them when fighting Vander, but it was never clear if they just overloaded or if they got destroyed. There was quite a bit of a time skip, so she could have just taken it from Vi's gauntlet when she escaped the prison, or maybe she really did hide it in her mouth or something like that. Anyway, the bomb she created is very accurate to her other explosives. Besides just using the chomper for the base, and the monkey head to end it all with the same monkey that started it, but also all of her explosives have this orange and green liquids in it. These were in the chomper Viktor was defusing, and they also appeared in the rocket. And so, Jinx pulls the pin, and what's crazy is that before Ekko goes back in time, you can actually see the explosion ripping the flesh from her face. But of course, yes, Ekko comes in to save her. It took him quite a few tries. He saw her blow up quite a lot, but every time she would take Ekko down with her. The one time he succeeded at playing into her emotions, she decided to spare Ekko, and that's why she jumped down before blowing up. The moment he actually saved her, Jinx looks down, and it seems like she notices the monkeys in the Z drive. At the same time, Ekko talks about how it's never too late to build something new. Perhaps someone worth building it for. Unfortunately, the scene cuts right after this, and it's not expanded upon. But the implication is that the two possibly got together after this. There will be more hints pointing at this later. So then we get to the morning of the big battle. Ambessa is found in her ship, and she has nobody to spar against, since both Rictus and Caitlyn are gone together with Mel. Back in Piltover, they are all going through the battle plan, and they are all back in their makeshift headquarters. Fun fact, they are using the same model of Piltover which Mel previously had in her own office. Here, Caitlyn asks if Viktor is at the center of all of this, and Jayce confirms this is all a destiny. They are meant to lose this fight. As he says this, we get a flashback of Viktor. This is actually the scene where Jayce fired at him. But here it is revealed that Viktor smiled before he was shot down. He knew this would happen. So then we get onto the battlefield. where Vi is saving a soldier. Later we learn it is Gert. In the background we can see the Noxian ships arrived, and the soldiers are approaching the outskirts. All while Loris is using the Hextech cannon to fire at the ships. For the most part, this entire battle is just rifles against crossbows. But then we get a shot of Mel giving orders to the soldiers. And it was revealed that Counselor Sula did not flee and she's here to support Piltover too. Back on the battlefield, we can see the Hextech cannons are firing shipping containers at the ships. In theory, this functions in the exact same way as the Hex Gates. Just instead of Zeppelins, it is shooting anything else. But when Vi drops off the soldier, she realizes it is Gert, who dies. Meanwhile, the piano boy is the one reloading the cannon. The reload mechanism actually has the Talis logo on it, because House Talis is behind a lot of the industrial inventions. So now it makes sense why it was Jayce teaching Loris how to use it. Ambessa then goes onto the front lines and she pulls out her twin Drakehounds. These are the two gauntlets shaped like Drakehounds, with the blades on the chains attached to them. The moment Ambessa reveals herself, Caitlyn is ready to snipe her down. Though she didn't know, Ambessa had the Rooker now. And yes, Maddie is there to see it all. The moment Ambessa saw Caitlyn was there, she gave the order to release her secret. Their own Noxian army on Shimmer. And they were dragging Viktor forward towards the Hex Gates. Of course, we know that this is just a misdirection. The real Viktor is gone. Meanwhile, Jayce was at the Hex Gate trying to take out the power cells to disable it. Every time he takes them out, a part of the Hex core shuts down. Back at the battlefield, Loris is getting ready to fire at Viktor. The piano boy keeps reloading, and here we get a better shot where the panel also says Talis Acceleration System. So I guess this machine originally functioned as a loading system. But then the shimmered hulks broke through the front lines and the archers took down Loris. So Piano Boy realized he had to do something. Back on ground, you can see Caitlyn's unit sneaking close. And you can see Maddie is the one who pulled out the bomb. But you can see, before she grabs it, she reaches to the side of it first. And then she goes back to pull it out. Which would explain who added the nail to the mechanism to screw with it. When you have a look at who is part of Caitlyn's squad now, you can see that's the father from the Goth family who stayed behind, and on the other side there was a second unit led by Stab, which also had the one warden who kept watch in the dungeons. So Caitlyn gives the order to use the Grey, the father stands up, and before he can throw it, he dies. So then we get the awesome scene where the squad tries to deliver the bomb, the original carrier gets stabbed, and Stab arrives to pick it up. A fun detail here, Stab did the same stabbing motion into the side of the soldier, which Loris showed them all at the beginning. Unfortunately though, the soldier takes off his mask, and so he has to deliver it through the Grey without help. After he plants it, the bomb fails because there was a nail in the mechanism, which was likely put there by Maddie. And so they all get ambushed and captured. The next time Caitlyn wakes up, the Noxians rounded everyone up, and they are back at the Piltover Customs, which is the entry point for anyone who landed in the harbor. This is the same place where they previously built up the barricades. Also, since it is the Customs, it makes sense for them to have all the other regions here on the window, but things get cool because besides the logo of the Freljord, Shurima, Ishtal, Bilgewater, Ionia, and Noxus, there is also a second version of Noxus and a second version of Ionia. And now I wonder, do they have separate customs for something like the capital cities? Is one the Immortal Bastion and the other the Placidium of Navori? I'd like to learn about that. Anyway, this is where it was revealed that Maddie was a betrayer. Be it because jealousy towards Vi, or because she just liked Noxus from the beginning. Well, actually, when Ambessa arrived, she told Caitlyn she warned her about the hazards of professional entanglement. By this, she's referencing the same thing she told her back in episode 4. Which means, from the point Ambessa learned Maddie and Caitlyn were together, Ambessa started pushing Maddie towards Noxian loyalty. Ambessa then takes a deep breath, enjoying the smell of victory. And Caitlyn goes for a pretty good attempt at taking her down. But Ambessa is too quick, and she stabs her in the ribs with a dagger. Which is where we get the amazing Maddie scene. Maddie says she did appreciate Caitlyn's warmth, and then she shoots. On the frame of the shot, for only a single frame, you can see Maddie's mouth turns into a creepy smile. But of course, the catch is, Mel covered Maddie in a bubble, and so the bullet bounces within it. You can even see how it bounces towards the front of the bubble, and then it hits Maddie between the eyes from the front. Maddie then drops on Caitlyn's shoulder. I kinda doubt that is a reference to their time together. And that's when Mel's powers were revealed on this battlefield. Mel calls Ambessa out for a senseless bloodshed. Ambessa called her a fox, remember this. The soldiers got ready to capture Mel, but before something could happen, Jinx, Ekko and the Firelights arrived on the battlefield. On their new airship nonetheless. This one is full of Easter eggs. First of all, notice everything is tagged in both the tags of Jinx and Ekko. This also includes their clothing, which is why it is teased that these two got together. But of course, here we can see the original bunny that belonged to Vi, and when Jinx is shown, you can see the mannequins of Milo and Clagger. These are the same ones that were in Jinx's hideout, and that's because this entire ship is the same hideout attached to the balloon. Here you can also see that Jinx is sitting back in the feathered chair from the finale of Season 1. Previously, the moment she sat down in that chair, she proclaimed herself Jinx. As the balloon approaches, you can see that the building is a stock exchange. Anyway, the airship itself is a massive Easter egg. First of all, notice the bunny ears at the top, below which you can see two big glass domes. One has a swirl, the other one has a cross on it. These mimic Isha's goggles from episode 4, while before that she wore the bunny ears in the same episode. So this entire ship is not only Jinx's hideout, but it's also a big reference to Isha. From the bottom you can also see it is covered in Jinx's cloud tattoos, as well as Ekko's hourglass. Then, as the firelights fly out from it, you can see Ekko and Jinx actually tagged each other's clothes, with Ekko now wearing his previous firelight mask on his knee. And this is why I'm sad that this scene wasn't extended. I'd love to see how the two just propped each other up. So the firelights go in, and with them, on the ground, we can see the rest of Zaun's citizens. We get Savika and Jericho followed by former Silco goons, as well as more fighters from the boxing league. Also, there is Theorem and the other Silco goon. Funnily enough, Theorem is throwing a Molotov cocktail, as he should. Ekko is then the one who takes down the big brute, and up at the balloon, Jinx arrived to save her sister. Here we get a better view of the goggles based on Isha. And of course, Jinx got a new gun. Now, as you may remember from episode 4, Jinx had the pieces of her guns lying around. Isha was the one who wanted her to fix it. So after Ekko arrived, they essentially combined everything together. So going back to episode 4, they used the head of the old fish bones, as well as the parts of the destroyed machine gun. Totally unrelated to this episode, as I was going through episode 4, I also noticed Jinx actually made her new finger from the tail of the unicorn which Powder found back in episode 1. Yep, there are still a lot of details yet to be found. Speaking of which, the reason why the gun has 5 barrels is because every barrel now shoots a bullet of a different color. These are green, blue, purple, yellow and orange. Anyway, meanwhile, Ekko charges in on the hoverboard, and the shot replicates him holding a selfie stick, and throughout all of this, the piano boy still remained alive. He took Loris off of the cannon and he sat in himself. He aimed at the cocoon, he fired and destroyed it. And it was revealed the cocoon was empty. It was just misdirection. Also, just like all of these Arcane creations, when something breaks, it starts to drip. So then we get back to the Hex Gates, where, using a laser, Viktor carved an upvote into the door. No, seriously, that is a strange shape to choose. Anyway, as Viktor walks in, he was revealed with almost a halo. Of course, this is connected to the Hex Claw that is behind him. But at the same time, this is portraying him as an almost holy man. A funny thing people noticed here is that the first time Viktor ever appears on screen in Arcane, he is shown like this, with a circle of runes around his head that foreshadowed the end. And here we can also see how the Arcane essentially split his face in half. He then says that he's more than he ever was, by which he is not wrong. He is everyone now. And that's when the shot reveals this. All the people of Viktor's Utopia and also Vander being united by the glorious evolution. Of course, since Ambessa made a deal with Viktor, you can see that the Noxian soldiers are spared for now. But outside of that, everyone else gets caught, and they are pointed towards the top of the Hex Gate. So here we can see Savika, as well as Silco's goons, getting caught, after which something interesting happens. Mel talks to Ambessa, and she talks about everything she has sacrificed for this, including Rictus and Kino. Interestingly enough, Ambessa only smiles, even when Mel mentions the death of her son. So really, who knows what were Ambessa's real intentions the entire time. The main point of this scene is, before Ambessa can even reply, Caitlyn smacks her and provokes her to a fight. From that point on, it is Mel and Caitlyn versus Ambessa. And just like she was taught by Ambessa, they would fight with spears, and Mel behind them. In fact, Ambessa immediately throws the spear, and if Mel wasn't there, Caitlyn would be dead. The detail here being that Ambessa aimed for Caitlyn's eye. A bit of a foreshadowing there, but while the battle started here, the machines started spreading into the fronts. For example, they got to the cannon and grabbed Piano Boy, which is where Vander, once again, faced Vi. Here, besides the pretty golden hair, you can notice how the original Chemtech claw stayed on, except it morphed. But also, all the mechanical valves got fused with the body. In this battle, Jinx arrived to save Vi, but Vander got onto her ship. So Vi then escapes the machines with another slow-mo jump. She did quite a few of these in this show, and she lands on Ekko's hoverboard. They all get onto the ship, and they fight Vander there. Meanwhile, Caitlyn, Mel and Ambessa keep fighting, but Mel can't do much because of the runes. Caitlyn manages to slice Ambessa's leg though, and then she gets knocked out. Back at the ship, they are going towards the Hex Gate, and there they pass by the big clock on it, which is where we have to point out a couple of things. First of all, yes, the time of this battle still does match the time of the final battle where Viktor wins. But also, notice the smaller clock on the top right. Those are the clock hands which get turned into Ekko's weapon later on. This is an incredibly cool reference to Ekko's original lore, because in his original story, Ekko got his bat from the clock tower down in Zaun. Also yes, the framing of Ekko and time is beautiful here. And in fact, just like it was shown in the future version of Piltover, the ship crashes right next to the clock here. Back at the Hex Gates, Jayce is just 2 segments away from shutting down the core, and that is where the Hexclaw was revealed. Now, it was confirmed that the Hexclaw is not the original invention from Season 1. It was something Viktor had in mind, and so his body just manifested it during the transformation. So in a way, it was inspired by it. Regardless, with the Hexclaw, Viktor slams all the cells back into the core, and he fully powers it up. Back at Ambessa's fight, she got into a situation where she held Caitlyn down and she was ready to kill her with the tip of a spear. Mel tried to save her with a shield, but the Rukern could go straight through the barrier. Caitlyn noticed it, and so she took the dagger out from her stomach, which Ambessa left there at the beginning of the fight, and she sliced the Rukern off. However, to do this, she had to let go with the hand holding the spear. So Caitlyn sacrificed her eye so that Mel had an opening to take her down. So, without the Rukern, Mel could unleash all her force. And in fact, what she did is that she used her necklace, which she got from the Black Rose. This captured Ambessa, and it allowed LeBlanc to take back what Ambessa stole. Even though what it is some kind of a power, I guess, because mostly it is still a mystery to us. And so LeBlanc started extracting something from Ambessa's ear, but then after she extracted it, Mel came in to interrupt her, and she used her power to destroy LeBlanc. Did she really do that? Not really. LeBlanc is mistress of illusions and tricks. I strongly doubt she did anything to her. All Mel achieved is that she cleansed her presence from Piltover for now. All while, Ambessa died. Now, we're not sure if that was actually Mel's goal. The entire thing is a one big question mark because it is set up for what comes next in League's story. So really, it almost feels like Mel just failed. However, Ambessa then calls her the Wolf, a reference to how before she was called a fox. And so, after she dies, all the soldiers salute, not only for Ambessa, but also for Mel, who became the new head of Clan Medarda. Back at the ship crash, Vi wakes up inside the Hex Gate. You can even see the valves and the runes on the sides. And while Vi rushes to Jinx to get her out, they kinda overlook Ekko. And it's funny that even Jinx doesn't exactly think about him, even though they just tagged each other's clothes. But Vi and Jinx get together. You can hear the same theme that appeared at the very beginning of the series. Here Jinx says, "I'm always with you, even when we are worlds apart." A clever nod towards Powder also caring about Vi in the alternative world, even though Vi died there. And yes, this is also a big reference to the end of this series. But then we go back to the Hex Gate, where Viktor walks past Jayce, and he essentially pockets the massive anomaly at the Hex core. He shrinks it down and puts it in his staff. From this point on, in a way, the staff almost mimics the design of the acceleration rune. Using the Arcane, Viktor then makes both of them float up. If you think about it, this magic was teased to be part of Hextech all the way back in Season 1. So Viktor starts going towards the peak of the Hex Gate, but Jayce knows in the alternative universe, that's where it all ended. So he starts following him using the hammer as a thruster. Back at the crash, you can see Vi and Jinx are about to fight evolved Vander. And from this angle, we get a better look at Jinx's gun. You can see the front part is still made out of Pow Pow, the original machine gun, and the back jaw is still the original fish bones. But the other half of it was turned into a rhino. Once again, this is a reference to Fortiche, just liking rhinos, I guess. But what's cool is that the middle part of the machine gun are parts of the Firlight's hoverboards. So Ekko helped Jinx make this gun. After which the fight begins. Meanwhile, below them, Viktor and Jayce are zipping past some known locations. For example, this is the maintenance area of the gate. This is where Viktor and Jayce kept watch over it to prevent Zaun from doing anything crazy here. Also, that bit in the middle is where Viktor originally coughed blood down there, which might have been what started the anomaly. And as they zip past this, you can see the entire place lighting up. That's because Viktor wants to unleash the power of the Hex Gate to evolve everyone. That is the reason why the fight with Vander goes into zero gravity. At that point, the Hex Gate is activated. And for a few seconds, Ekko appears just to remind us that he is still around. To escape zero gravity Vander, Jinx fires her gun behind her to go forward, and it is not very effective. Here we get another cool shot of the new weapon, and we can better see the rhino, as well as the fins at the front of the machine gun, which almost mimic the ears on Jinx's gun in the game. So next, she fires a rocket, and she just misses. On the second try, she hits, and it is also not very effective. But that is when Jayce and Viktor start getting closer. They were now at the crash, and eventually they zipped past Vander. And they ended up at the very top of the gate, which became the Eye of the Storm. If you look at the panel Viktor blew out there, you can see now the scene matches the vision of the alternative universe. After which we get a better look at the evolved machines. And here I really want to point out something. I tried to see if I can match some of these to the people from the Utopia, because matching Huck was pretty easy. And yes, all of these should be Viktor's followers. But unfortunately, you may notice that Fortiche turned these into modular assets. Which means that there are a few different torsos, some heads and some different legs, and Fortiche just randomized this as if it was a character creator, to spit out a varied lineup of machines. This is also how they make big crowds, by the way. So none of these are supposed to match a specific person. But as a fun fact, you may notice that sometimes the random generation spits out exact copies. For example, these two landed on the same head, the same torso, and the same legs. Anyway, after that, Viktor releases the anomaly into the sky, and he unleashes the Arcane Storm. Not only is this a reference to Viktor's ultimate ability in the game, but also this is the same storm which Jayce faced in the alternative universe. And this storm is what links everyone together, and tries to turn everyone into the glorious evolved. But notice that this also includes the Noxians. So just like LeBlanc mentioned, Ambessa would be arrogant. She would help Viktor achieve his goal, but eventually the Noxians too would be unified. What's interesting is that later the storm also reaches into the Hex Gate. And you can see 3 strands heading down, not for Vi, Jinx and Vander, but it should be Vi, Jinx and Ekko. And somehow, Jinx is able to dodge the storm reaching out with her shimmer, but eventually Vander catches them so they can't escape. And that is when Ekko wakes up. And once he looks up, he can see the arms of the clock tower, which he could previously see before they crashed. Once again, this is a cool callback to Ekko's original lore. And what's kinda strange is that from this point on, we don't get to see what happened with the third strand from the storm. I guess Ekko just escapes it on the hoverboard. So we go back to the top of the gate. And here we can see Jayce grab his hammer, and as he does this, he realizes this is the end. Because right now, he is sitting in the exact same position he was found in the alternative universe. We then get a closer shot of Jayce, where, as the lightning strikes in the distance, Viktor appears behind him in an instant. This is related to how the mage in the past always seemingly appeared out of nowhere. So Jayce breathes out, knowing it is all over. They were destined to lose, and Viktor links him with the rest. Which is where things get a bit interesting. This shows everyone who is connected to the storm, but you can also see it links up to something beyond this realm. To me, this might be teasing that the power of the Arcane comes from a celestial source. I mean, in the past it was teased that the world runes, and in a way, magic too, came from a celestial who was having a bit of fun with Runeterra. Nothing was ever directly confirmed, but if magic is linked to the celestials, that absolutely makes sense. Maybe there is a celestial who would like to use mortals as living batteries or something like this. Also, the prime example of a mage using Arcane is Xerath, who was transformed into pure energy using the Sun Disk, with the Sun Disk reflecting celestial magic. As to why all of this is happening here, well, that is a topic for a separate theory video, but it's likely that it is the hex core that made Viktor do this, with the hex core ultimately being linked to the Arcane, and therefore possibly something celestial. Anyway, in the next shot we get to see this. A proper framing of Jayce as someone shepherding the souls into the glorious evolution. And again, you can see that while Viktor himself is radiating power from his mask, indicated by the lines on the sides, the souls of the evolved are not actually linked to him. It goes somewhere else. Which is where Viktor gets his speech of uniting everyone, so that mortals would stop their senseless conflicts. And Jayce disagrees. He believes there is beauty in imperfections. Of course, as he says that, he looks at his feeble mortal body. After which, for 3 frames, we can see a green streak zip past, which revealed that Ekko was about to interrupt him. But there were no streaks from the storm following him. Also, he is holding the hand of the clock tower now. Unfortunately, before he gets to Viktor, he gets punched down. So he recalls for seconds, and knowing what's going to happen, he ducks. Moments later, he then gets tackled down, and so he tries to do the same thing. But he ends up pinned to the ground and unable to use the Z drive again. Meanwhile, Jayce is now being evolved too. So in that moment, Ekko is the last mortal that can stop this. As he's being lifted up, he tries to recall again. But it's too late now, he can't go past the point of being held. And slowly, with the gold in his eyes, you can see he's being transformed too. So, with his last effort, he overclocks the Z drive, which causes a small explosion as he recalls back. This is a reference to Ekko's ultimate ability in the game. It all gets surrounded in the image of a butterfly, just like when Jayce entered the anomaly in episode 6, which means Ekko successfully recreated the anomaly here. And he recalls past the moment Jayce was being transformed. This is why Jayce can speak after this scene, and he goes to the moment he zipped past Viktor. But instead going to the side, he threw the anomaly at him. Viktor can't believe this. And in the show, he simply says, "This device can't be." This is likely because Viktor thought he was the only one capable of dealing with the anomaly. But here he was proven wrong. By Ekko, a mortal who managed to achieve the exact same thing with science. Also, you can see the anomaly is small in the Z drive, but it is massive from Viktor's perspective. This is reflecting how Viktor saw the massive anomaly down at the hex core, but it was tiny, and so he put it in his staff. Again, referencing how Ekko managed to recreate the core's anomaly. So the anomaly Ekko created goes off, and in a way, that was the only thing on the same power level as Viktor, which is why it could damage him. In this shot, you can see the pieces of the Z drive flying around. And that made me realize, yes, the Z drive did technically come from an alternative universe. So maybe that's also why Viktor was confused about it. And when we get to this shot of Viktor, you can see the mask turns liquid when broken. This is still consistent with how the machines leak when killed, or how the cocoon dripped when it broke. Here you can also notice how the inside of Viktor's head is fully replaced by the Arcane. In fact, this is what bursted out to create the mask. But of course, from his perspective, this blasted a hole into the Arcane, and it let mortal Viktor take control again. Alternatively, because it was Ekko's anomaly doing this. It is also possible that just like before we could see the anomaly kinda converting two universes together, perhaps the Viktor we can see here in the mask is a Viktor from the past before he was destroyed by the Arcane. But here the theories would go wild. What's crazy here is that once the mask gets broken, you can see the strands going out from it, confirming that in a way Viktor too is being shepherded by a higher force. He is not an exception. And since Viktor covered his face, his hand let go of Jayce, and so Jayce was back now. Which is where Jayce decided to speak into Viktor's human side. As he said, all he wanted was to get his partner back. That is where the scene cuts to Viktor, looking at his celestial body through his human eyes. And he just can't believe Jayce is this persistent. But Jayce revealed that's because he promised it to Viktor. This is referencing the line, "I will not fail," which is where Jayce hugs Viktor. And just like before when Singed grabbed Viktor, Viktor could see his past, so did he now see Jayce's past, which included the visions from the alternative universe. First, Viktor could see the horror devoid of life the world would be turned into. But he doesn't see it as the Herald. He sees this as a human, the Viktor still behind the mask. After which we get to the scene where it is revealed that the mage who gave Jayce the runestone was Viktor. In fact, it seems it would be the Viktor from the universe where he won. Again, all of this is a subject to a whole another theory video. But it seems like this is the Viktor who won because this was the alternative universe where Viktor didn't have Jayce to stop him. Meaning he didn't get shot, he just summoned the storm to evolve everyone, and as a result, in theory, he wouldn't grow the mask in this version. Also, from this shot, we can finally properly see the human face that stayed on Jayce's husk, which is unusual if you look at the other evolved. Anyway, here Viktor confirmed he just wanted to end the world's suffering, but instead he removed life from it. That is where we get a flashback to the future Viktor giving the runestone to young Jayce. At first, we can see an empty acceleration rune, and as he catches it, the shot goes to this. This confirms that the outcome of Jayce getting the empty version of that rune is Viktor winning. Which is where Viktor mentioned there was no prize to perfection, only an end to pursuit, revealing that Viktor had no satisfaction in solving conflict. But that is also where he revealed that Viktor tried to stop himself. He looked for a timeline where someone could stop him. And so here we can see Viktor giving Jayce different kinds of runes, until he ends up with the acceleration rune, which is the same rune they used for the hex core. It is the same rune Ekko used to power the Z drive. And that is because that is the one rune that kickstarted the anomaly of the Arcane. So in these flashbacks you can see he kept this one on him. Viktor later passed it back to him when he prevented his suicide. They used this rune in their research. It worked and they made Hextech. And as the future version of Viktor said, throughout this partnership, the version of Viktor who grew up with Jayce, which is the one with the mask, could see the glorious evolution was not worth pursuing. Which is further confirmed by the present version of Viktor standing behind Jayce, witnessing this. And indeed, you can see the panic in Viktor's human eye. Not only did he see that he reached a power level so high only he could stop himself, but also he realized that this is exactly what happened. Because his partnership with Jayce showed how great it is to chase a dream, he wanted to stop the pursuit of the glorious evolution, which would take all of that away. This would only ever happen in a universe where Jayce is the one who makes Hextech with Viktor. Because, as was mentioned, regardless of what happens in a timeline, someone eventually picks up Hextech anyway. This was also teased when Powder opened up the drawer. In that universe, it seems like Powder was the one who would make Hextech for them. So it is entirely possible someone else becomes the Herald there too. But in order for Viktor to be stopped, he simply needed Jayce to be his science partner. And so, in this next scene, we can see the humanity of Viktor taking over, as the mask disintegrates, and in the next shot, Viktor is just Viktor's soul again. In utter confusion, Viktor pushes Jayce away and looks around. He can now see the endless ocean of mortal souls shackled by magic. And here I noticed a strange detail. It seems that all of these souls are specifically from Piltover, because in the background you can see the faint images of places in Piltover. That right there is the Bridge of Progress at night. And here in the front we can see the view of the highest buildings of Piltover. This specifically are the Medarda headquarters. Anyway, after seeing this, Viktor tells Jayce to go, because he wanted to end it all. And he didn't want Jayce to be taken down with him. But Jayce refused by putting a hand on his shoulder, exactly like Viktor did to Jayce before. After which, Jayce reaches for the rune that was fused into his body by future Viktor himself, he rips it out, and he gives it back to Viktor. This scene is perfectly mirroring the scene where Viktor gave him the rune back in Season 1. And in fact, this is likely the key Viktor wanted to achieve the entire time. Because the rune Jayce gave to him is the acceleration rune. We know this rune can create the anomaly and it lets you teleport you through time and space. Again, not only was this the key for Ekko to create the Z-Drive, but even when Jayce fought Viktor's machine, from Viktor's celestial perspective, when Jayce fired using the rune, the blast sucked in reality. And so now, that is the exact same thing they are planning to do. Using the acceleration rune, Viktor and Jayce would take everything away. Upon activating it, you can see that the rune is using Viktor's body as a conduit. And as it gets unleashed, it simply mimics the previous Hextech experiments, the ones where the runes fly around them, except everything is magnified. After these runes get activated, you can see the gold souls leaving the evolved machines. These are likely the souls of those who got already evolved, and so they got turned into celestial matter. We can see these souls fly towards the sky, after which we get a shot of the runes being related to the anomalies. Moments later, the runes get turned into portals, which likely let the souls enter the celestial realm. I'm gonna be honest, I would not be surprised if all of this ends up somehow being linked to Bard, a celestial being with a very similar theme. Anyway, then we get to see that as the runes are channeled, the anomaly is right above them. The souls then enter their realm too, and you can see how in the middle Viktor and Jayce are just flailing around, just like they had when they first figured out Hextech. The rune then becomes too powerful, so Jayce comes in to help. The souls then make a dome around them, almost as if to contain them as the anomaly slowly grows. But soon it gets so big it starts covering our view. Through the anomaly, we get to see a window into the reality outside, in a similar way to how it functioned when Ekko made it himself. And here we can see that everything that happened between Jayce and Viktor here happened in an instant. Outside of the celestial realm, the anomaly explosion is still only just happening. But more than that, you can see that this is what the anomaly inside the realm was. The entire time, it was the one explosion Ekko created. It is the same explosion that would still make Viktor win. because a remnant of this explosion can be found in the future version of this universe. This wasn't there in any other reality. But since in this universe Jayce was specifically given the acceleration rune, they could get rid of it. And so, the rune in Jayce's body is charged by Viktor. In their final moment, the two embrace themselves as partners. And fulfilling its purpose, the rune turns into a portal. It sucks in both Jayce and Viktor, including the anomaly that was about to explode. You can see the acceleration rune is still at the center of this, with the cape Jayce gave to Viktor at the beginning still being present. And it all vanishes through time and space, meaning Viktor and Jayce are likely not dead. Instead, they might be on a celestial level now. After this, time moves forward again, and to everyone else, this all happened in an instant. This also cleared Piltover of the Arcane storm, and in a blink of an eye, everyone got released, because the bodies of the evolved machines were empty now. However, there are some exceptions, for one sciencey reason or another. Most likely because of some of Sinch's shenanigans with Shimmer, his creations prevented the evolved souls from leaving the bodies. This first gets confirmed in the next scene with Vander. Here, as Vi gives in to her emotions, she doesn't flee. She grabs Vander's body, and the shot shows us the parallel shot for me, so it is doing my job. And somehow, Vander's body can still move on its own. This all results in Jinx essentially sacrificing herself. She tackles Vander, Vi tries to prevent them from falling down, but Jinx knows it is too late. The last words she says is, "Always with you, sis." Here she is referencing how previously she said the two would always be together, even when they are worlds apart. Remember this, it comes back at the end. And so she releases the gemstone. That disabled the glove, and they fell down. For the first time since Isha's death, Jinx is happy. In this scene, while we would normally be focusing on Jinx embracing Vander, just look at the background. There are a lot of big holes and some ventilations there, right? Anyway, this is where Jinx gets her flashbacks. And the exact same song, which played when Jinx wanted to end her life, plays again, fully completing the circle. So here we can see how it all started with Powder making her first inventions. We can see the first one that ever appeared in the show, and the monkey that was still used as an alarm in the last drop. In the background we can see Vander putting Powder and Vi to sleep in Powder's bed in the last drop. Here we can also see Vi with her bunny. After which, Jinx pulls out the same bomb she previously used to try and take her own life. In a way, she is doing the exact same thing. And as she does that, Vander blows out her candle, which immediately transitions into the explosion. And here, people were quick to point out something important. As the explosion goes off, you get a bunch of different visual effects on the screen. But one of them is this pink line. The thing is, over time, all the other effects fade out. But this one stays there. The idea being that this is the same line that reflects Jinx's movement when she engages Shimmer, meaning it is possible Jinx escaped the explosion. This scene then ends with Vi being left alone, without Vander or Jinx, while above, the cycle was broken. And where Jayce was kneeling before, only the hammer was left behind. For only a little bit, because then it crumbles without the presence of the force that created it. In the aftermath of this war, we can see the empty destroyed buildings of Piltover. Here is one of the towers with the cannon, and here it goes back to the Bridge of Progress, giving us a parallel shot of the time Vi visited this place with Vander. And here, everyone united to hold a memorial for those who have fallen during the war. Here, people write a name on a piece of paper and they light them up so they can fly away. And you can see how united people are now. Because here we get a Piltover putting in a name, and right next to him there is a Jinxer. And of course, the woman with the two missing fingers is Jayce's mother. She is dressed in black because now Jayce has gone missing. Next we can see the family of the father who died during the war. And here you can notice the mother has Janna tattooed on her chest. After which we can see it would be Savika and Sula who light up the papers. These essentially have the roles of the representatives of Zaun and Piltover. Next, it is revealed that Scar and his son are still alive, as well as the piano boy. Look, if he gets turned into Jin, I'm not sure what I'm gonna do. Which is when we get Ekko on screen, writing down the name of Powder. He is sitting in the same place he kissed her for the first time, which is also where the entire series started. After this, we can also see the new council. All of the heads of the families who were previously present during the meetings are here, and Savika was confirmed to be part of the council to give Zaun a voice. Interestingly enough, 2 seats remained open here. It is possible that Caitlyn stepped down, or it is possible that Caitlyn simply wasn't present here. But the other one might be the former seat of Medarda. Also, here, Savika is actually sitting in the former chair of Caitlyn. And that's where the big reveal hits us. Out of everyone, Singed, now known as Dr. Revek, got a happy ending. He resurrected his dead daughter Oriana by using Viktor's glorious evolution. Again, even though Viktor is gone, there are 2 possible reasons why Oriana is still here. Either this has to do with the Sky teasers, and while Viktor was getting pumped with Vander's blood, it is possible he extracted something else and used it for Oriana, or it is possible that the fusion of Apex Shimmer and Apex Hextech simply prevents the evolved soul from leaving. So once Viktor evolved Oriana, even after he was gone, she still remained. This could be the exact same reason why Vander could also move. Next, the raven that followed Mel to Piltover arrived at the Hex Gate. Here, from a distance, you can see that Jinx's ship is still crashed into it. This raven then lands where Jace's hammer crumbled, and it jumps to the remains. After which the raven was revealed to be Raum's raven, with Raum being the demon of secrets who later lends his power to Swain. And here we can see it pecking at the remains of the Hextech that was left here. Which means the demon now knows about what happened here, so later Swain will know as well. Next we can see Mel sitting on Ambessa's bed in her ship, teasing that Mel is now the head of Clan Medarda, with the ships followed by the Raven heading to Noxus. And finally it all cuts to Caitlyn, who is at the Kiraman library. Here she is going through the newly added entries for the archives, one of which are plans of the Hex Gates. Here it is called a Gravitational Calibration Flight Acceleration, designed by Jace Tallis. On the outside it has a decently accurate layout of the world, including Ionia at the top right, with the mark just above Piltover being the immortal bastion of Noxus, then the Avarosan territories of the Freljord, and finally the capital of Demacia. The plans then reveal the inside of the gate. This is the place where Vi and Jinx fought Vander. After which we can see that Caitlyn is holding the head of Jinx's bomb. This means that they found the remains of the explosion, but not Jinx's body. So then we get a zoom in directly under the place where Jinx blew up, and it is revealed that to the side there are ventilation shafts. If we combine this with the pink streak of the explosion, it really seems like Jinx escaped. But she didn't tell anyone because she just wanted to walk away to break the cycle. And of course, now we know, Caitlyn also knows. But she's keeping Jinx's secret to herself. She is not going to tell Vi, because the cycle wouldn't break. So then we get a quick scene of Vi humming the first song that ever appeared in Arcane. In fact, that was on the bridge where Powder was originally singing it. And now it is Vi. Also yes, Vi is sitting on a coffee table because chairs are too normal for her. And here we can see the level of permanence Arcane has, as the scar on Vi's cheek remained there even after being healed. So we get one last shot of Caitlyn holding back the little secret. And it all ends with this shot of the Zeppelin. The very same one that appeared at the beginning of Arcane. The same one which Powder saw, and she said that one day she was going to ride it. And indeed, it seems like Powder is still alive. She is riding the Zeppelin out of Piltover, perhaps into an entirely different region, leaving her past behind, just like Silco suggested. The end.